Well, guys, I've talked to most of y'all about video already, but I will give a short kind of rundown of this. But since there's a smaller group and y'all have different skill levels, I'm not going to go too deep into super technical. I'm not going to be too surface level. And then what we can do is we can just have some time to talk at the end. Spend like 15, 20 minutes just talking rather than trying to just talk about stuff that may not interest you guys.
Yeah. I think Johnny's part of our camera team
All right.
as well. So he started, how many 2 months now, isn't it? 2 months, yeah.
All right.
John's a bit more green on this side of things, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and again, even this, like my main goal, or I didn't really know exactly if he wanted it to be like, I didn't want to go too far live stream video or too far social media. So we'll kind of just cover both. But this session, we do have an hour, so we'll kind of just discuss the different things. Just to start us off right, let's go ahead and pray for the day and the other sessions that are going on and for tonight. And let's just start off right. Thank you, Jesus, for the opportunity to gather. I ask that you touch each and every one of us. Help us to learn and grow. Help me to speak with clarity what you've taught me and allowed me to learn, and help me to be able to give as much of that to them as possible. Help us all today to learn from each other, to learn from the other sessions going on, to help the other teachers. Help us tonight as we come together for service. Keep us all safe. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys. So really the goal of video in the church is we talked about it yesterday in the other creative sessions, but our ultimate goal is to reach people. That should always be our goal. So whether we're a door greeter, whether we're a videographer, a photographer, social media, preacher, the goal is to reach people with the gospel. That's ultimate goal. As videographers, though, we have to kind of narrow down that goal because we need a focus. We have to have a plan for what we're doing. So our goal as videographers is to help reach people through the use of videography, through that medium. So that can also be, like we talked about yesterday, magnifying the message. So pastor spends his time preaching a really great message. He does a great job. We have this great message. What we do with video is all used to help magnify what he preached. We want to be very careful. Oh, we got someone coming in. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. We want to be very careful that when we're making videos of the preaching, that we are not changing what was preached. We are magnifying what was preached. And that goes the same with everything else we create. But since this is about video, that's what we'll discuss, that we want to make sure that we are magnifying what was preached rather than changing what was preached. So our goal as videographers in the church is to creatively, as best as we can, help magnify the message of the church, help magnify the vision of the church, to present that to a social media world, a video focused world, a YouTube world. Like that's where everyone is now. So we want to use our abilities to reach that group of people. So the power of video in modern ministry, I mean, we just kind of touched on it. It is what modern people are using. If you open your phone, I feel like every app that's somewhat social focused is video. In some way prioritizes video. Facebook does it now, Instagram does it now, TikTok. They're all prioritizing video content. And so we can utilize that to be able to reach people on those platforms. And then you also have the aspect of live stream, where live stream is, especially over the last 5 years because of COVID and learning how to navigate that, we've learned how valuable live stream is to a church. It is not just for the sick sometimes, but it's also to expand our reach globally. I mean, POS has a global reach when it comes to their live stream. They have a reach in Sydney, but they also have a global reach where people all over the world are watching your stream. All over the Pacific region, they're watching the POS stream. And so what you're doing is you're taking Pastor Stanley's message and you are magnifying that to this crowd. And we want to do our best to present it as good as possible because he's presenting it as good as he can. So we want to present it as good as we can, and we also want to make sure that we are doing a service to the message by presenting it the best that we can and as accurately to what he presented it. I know we've all been in the place where with music, sometimes the music team feels like they do something on Sunday, it sounds really good in the room, but it doesn't present itself the same in live stream. And that's simply the fact of we want to make sure everything we do presents as transparently as possible in the live stream or in our social media videos. So there's multiple types of content, and we talked about this yesterday in like what type of content we can go for. In video, again, that is a type, but there's also types of videos. There's recap videos, there's sermon videos, there's reels, there's worship reels, there's fun reels, there's creative reels. There's so many different types of video content that you can utilize. You can even do stuff like testimony videos with individuals who have a testimony, and you can make like a short film with them. You can do so many ways of being able to present the message of the gospel creatively through video. And so we're just looking for other ways to do that, different methods to do that, different options of presenting the message with video. So that also brings us to what we talked about yesterday again. And I know some of y'all might have been in the sessions yesterday. These things will intertwine, but that's just because that's what we do. The nature of social media, the nature of video is that they all kind of function as one. And that goes back to when we talked about creative teams where we have to communicate with each other. You may be the video team and you're over the video team, or all you do is video, but you still have to communicate with the photographers. You still have to communicate with the social team lead, things like that, because all of these things interact together. So when you're looking at the type of content that you're making, you also want to be aware of where that content is going. We talked about, again, yesterday, where some content works great on Facebook, some content works great on YouTube, some content works great on Instagram, TikTok. They all kind of, yes, they all like video and similar content, but they also all have their own demographics, their own styles. Instagram and TikTok are vertical reels always. Facebook, I feel like reels have never really taken off there. They're there, but I still feel like when it comes to Facebook, our church gets better response on our longer form, like 2 to 5 minute videos that are horizontal than they do on any reels. And that's just the nature of Facebook. YouTube, our medium range or our short videos don't do great. We do keep posting our shorts there, and that's helped grow our audience a lot because YouTube for a long time was really prioritizing shorts, and I think they still kind of are. But YouTube is where we have a lot of people that come to watch a full sermon. They'll watch for 30 minutes, they'll play it and put it on their TV, or they'll just have it playing in the background. So being aware of the video content that we create and where that content is going to go will also help determine whether we shoot horizontal, whether we shoot vertical, whether we use an iPhone or whether we use a $3,000 camera. Trying to find that balance of what are we creating, how are we creating, why are we creating. So again, I don't want to go too deep into like the techie aspect of it, but when it comes to like what's needed, typically you're going to want cameras, microphones, lighting, things like that. And what we'll do is we'll open for questions if you want to ask tech questions, because again, I don't want to talk on one skill level if you guys are on a different one, up or down, either way. But the main goal is to focus on video, its purpose in the church, why we're using it in the church, and again, that ultimately just goes back to spreading the message. One thing that I like to do, and this kind of is another way to think about it, and what our church is doing currently, is we prioritize our live stream video more than social even. So our live stream, we use it on iMag in the house, so it's visible to everyone sitting in the house, and then we also have we don't have a large viewership, but we have people who view, and then our message tend to get views after. So I was for a long time really focusing on making our social media video as good as possible, because I would have thousands of views on a social media video, but then we would only have a couple hundred on live stream. So I was like, well, more people are watching this. So I prioritized social for a really long time, and then I realized that if they watched our social and really liked it and wanted to watch the full thing, they would click on another page and it would be completely different. So then I realized that I was kind of doing a disservice to anyone I caught by our social looking good, because they would hop on our live stream and it wouldn't feel the same. So I feel like that was actually, in a way, negatively impacting us, because we weren't, again, back to yesterday, we weren't authentic in our social presentation when it came to our live stream. So for the last year, rather than putting a really heavy emphasis on our social media capture, I've rather put the heavier emphasis on our video team for live broadcast, and I take our social media videos from that. So now if you watch our reels, they look good. They are not as great as they used to be, but they still look good. And then when you watch our live stream, it's the same image. It's the same people, the same camera look, the same quality. So rather than having two completely different things, I'm able to put a strong focus on live stream and then get a strong result on Instagram as well, or YouTube, because I'm pulling from the live stream. That also really helped us when it came to volunteer base, because I'm sure everyone deals with this, but volunteers are not always easy to come by. There's a lot of work and few people to do it, and we also need to be aware that we're not serving every week, that we're not overwhelming ourselves, that we're not getting burnt out, things like that, or that we're not burning out young volunteers or burning out new volunteers, things like that. So we have to be cautious of that and aware of that, and to do that, we have to look at things from the decision of what's going to give us quality. Yes, we want to focus on quality. We want to focus on presentation, but we also have to make sure that we're doing things that are sustainable. Another thing that I ran into when I started working at this church is I had all these great ideas. I had these really big, fun ideas where I'm going to make a recap video every week. We're going to do this. It's super cool. And then I realized about 3 weeks later that that's impossible to keep up with because it's exhausting. So learning how to balance what we want to do, how we want to get there in the process, and making sure that we're not going too far one direction or too little the other direction to do things that are not sustainable. So just I want to kind of just make sure that is a big thought, because we can kind of, I do it a lot. I'll go to a conference, I'll get information, I'll walk home and I'll be like, we're going to do all these new things. And the team struggles with it because I'm just throwing new stuff on them and not creating a sustainable path to that. So I know that's not as video focused, but I think all these classes kind of just coincide with each other. But video is valuable in the aspect that it serves that role and that purpose, and that our goal is to reach more people. The distribution of video. Where is your video going? Again, we talked about social, but we also want to make sure that we're distributing to platforms and trying to think of the vision of our videos. So another thing to look at is trying to find out exactly what the style of our church is. So this is something that I've actually dealt with for a while, because I love the cinema style. And for a long time, our church was using broadcast cameras that gave the broadcast style. And I would sometimes incorporate my camera into the system, and then it felt kind of off because it was back and forth. So learning how to figure out what the vision of the church is. If we want the cinema style, we want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So when I started incorporating the Blackmagics into the church, I had talked to Pastor. I talked to our creative director, who has had conversations with Pastor about it. But I was like, is the look that we're giving right now the look that Pastor wants? Because ultimately, we are serving the church, but we're serving Pastor's vision. And so we want to make sure that what we're doing is aligning with that vision. So we got the approval that, hey, what we're doing is what Pastor likes, so we're able to continue that. But we have to make sure that what we're doing is following the vision of the church. There's a lot of ways to approach broadcast. You can go super deep into it. You can go crazy. You can do crazy, exciting, fun things. But if that doesn't serve the vision of the church and the pastor, then we have to be aware that we may need to scale back, or we may need to go another direction, or look at different gear, dependent on what the vision of the church is, what the vision of the pastor is. So that's always a really good conversation. And it's not necessarily something that's saying we have to buy all new things, but you can talk to your pastor and be like, hey, are we headed in the direction that you want to go? Or is there a specific direction that you want to go? Do you have an input on video? Things like that. Because again, your audience is a global audience. And so there is a need for good video because it's reaching a lot of people. But we want to make sure that we're serving the vision of the church. And so I won't go too deep past that for the sake of I don't want to teach how I do things without preferencing how you guys might do things. But what I will go ahead and do is we have about 30 minutes So I want to make this very interactive at this point where I will open for questions. You can ask a technical question. You can ask how I do video in a certain way at my church, anything like that. But I want to open it for questions so that we can I can help you guys in the areas that you want answers. So video focused questions, whether it be technical, creative, video directing, video team, anything like that, we'll go ahead and open for questions. Yes.
When you mentioned how your church does the reels, how do you, when you grab your live stream, do you record your cameras and then edit what's on the live stream, or do you just take the live stream from YouTube and edit that?
So I don't take things from cameras. I've done that too, and it may be beneficial to do that rather than trying to do it the way I do it at some point, because you will get better quality if you just have your operator recorded in camera. So I've done that multiple times, but the way I've gotten now is I have the LUT for I designed a LUT for my church, and then I put it on my cameras. So I'm already getting the look I kind of want color graded. And so I take our program feed, and on the switcher, we use the aux output to go to a HyperDeck for clean feed.
Yeah.
So I'm recording a feed that doesn't have lyrics, doesn't have scriptures, things like that. So I can crop it vertically and not have to crop above lyrics and just shrink it even more. And I will say there is a benefit that I have that a lot of churches don't necessarily have is right now we're currently using our LED wall and we're running vertical iMag. So basically it looks like two big vertical screens, and that's what we're running our iMag on. So our camera operators are already trained to think vertically when they're shooting. So they're not framing left or right, they're framing everything vertically. So that makes cutting reels super easy because I don't have to reframe, I don't have to cut and move. I just basically put it on a 9x16 timeline and cut the spots I want. But you could do it both ways. It may be beneficial. I know y'all have a mix of different cameras. So if you're wanting a very standard look, you may just record on one of the cameras and cut reels from that. But at least you're not having to schedule out a social media operator and a live stream operator every week. You're able to combine the roles and develop a system that works best. For me, the big thing was I didn't have a lot of volunteers that could serve on Sundays, but I had no volunteers that were willing to edit throughout the week. So all the editing fell on me. So if I had to get all the footage from the social media person, and I was still taking audio from live stream, and then I had to match everything up and then cut it all. And then you also are limited to whatever shots that person took. Whereas now, if it's good on the live stream, it's good on the social because it's the same thing. So I just kind of put my focus on making sure the live stream was what I wanted and then cutting from there. But at the moment, if it's more beneficial, like if you're running a roamer cam and you're thinking social media wise, but you're also in the live stream, you can just record on there and have that card that would be your social capture card. And so it may be more beneficial, but yeah, just for trying to find ways that you can work together as a team rather than you're already running a camera, you're already videoing, you're already following the preacher or the action, whatever it may be. So at that point, you're just adding another person to stand there and capture reels when you could be doing it in one camera. So it's trying to just be efficient with our workload and volunteers. Anyone else? Come on. Hard questions, easy questions. I'll answer them all.
On your socials, you know how you do the multicam?
Yeah.
How do you do that? Do you have OBS open or something like that? Or?
Actually, yes. So I've done it a couple different ways, but the way that I just recently did it, I think is the way that I'll be doing it from now on because it was very easy. So I have to get video streamed to my computer, and through that I used OBS to stream it, which for some reason the streaming doesn't always work. Sometimes I just use OBS to capture it.
Yeah.
And again, I could capture my multicam and then go in and edit it because OBS crushes colors. I don't know if y'all know that or have seen it. It always makes my image way darker and it's not as good of quality, I've noticed. But again, my ultimate goal is trying to be efficient. So I'd rather just record it, split in that image, the vertical setup on OBS, than capture it and have to realign it later.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing is I'm actually using OBS, and then I have, the last event I did, I bought the Elgato capture card.
Yeah.
It's literally just an HDMI into a USB. So I plug that into my computer from the multicam output of the switcher, and then open OBS, and I just stack. So I actually just take the multicam once and put the top left above, and I take the multicam again and put the bottom right above. So it's actually I'm just duplicating the source and moving them, and that's all it really is. And then for audio, I use the DJI lapel mic, and I actually the comms that I use have an 1/8 inch out. So I just plug in 1/8 inch to the mic and plug that into my computer as well. So that's how I'm doing it. I've used a HyperDeck before and used the USB-C out of the HyperDeck to work as the capture card. That's a much more expensive version of what I got the Elgato link for. The only thing I would recommend if you're wanting to get a setup like that is if you have a HyperDeck available, just use that. If you don't, get the newer Elgato card, or the bigger Elgato card that has the HDMI pass-through. Because not a lot of switchers actually have HDMI and SDI multicam outs. Most just have one of them. So if I wanted to run that, I would run that into my computer, and then I wouldn't have another output for a multicam. So you'd have to do a loop out or a whole mess of cables. So if you're going to do it, I recommend getting that Elgato with the HDMI pass-through, and that's an easy way to do it. Any more questions? We got plenty of time, guys.
I guess I'll go again.
Go for it.
What format is your church? Like, I know you mentioned you're not shooting cinema style. So, like, I remember last night you were mentioning we filmed in 23. Does your church also broadcast in 23?
We don't. I wanted to, and there was one point that I attempted to switch everything over to 2398, and I couldn't figure out. I kept getting I was getting a lot of latency on our LED wall on iMag, like probably like a second, 2 seconds, which is almost like impossible to really use in a service because it's just so drastic.
Yeah.
So I ended up, we scrapped it. We went back to 60 because it was like the week of an event. So I wasn't gonna, it was late. It didn't work. I just went back to 60. However, when I travel and do events, if I have the ability, I do 2398.
Yeah.
For me, I wouldn't say there's a massive difference when I look at things and I say, oh yeah, that was filmed in 23 or that was 60. I don't think it's that prominent, but with my cameras, I do like a lot of motion. And so if you watch some of my multicams or some of the clips that I've done, especially at events where I have a little bit more creative freedom. So I did an event last January or December that I had a lot of freedom. They said basically just you do video, make it look however you want. And so we did a lot of like movement on cameras, and at 60 that would have felt really kind of hyper focused.
Yeah.
And so I've always noticed that feels really like off. And so the 2398 just makes that motion feel smoother, makes everything feel a little bit more cinematic is I guess the term that people are using for it now. But at our church, we film in 60. The other thing this is pure me not being lazy, but me not wanting to deal with it, is when you film in 60, it's so much more storage.
Yeah.
Like 2398 is over half the storage size less.
Yeah.
So when I do have, like for an event where I'm also live streaming and capturing, I just would prefer 2398 simply for the fact of I don't have to deal with like 5 terabytes of footage by the end of the week. So there's kind of multiple things, but ultimately I do like the look of 2398, but I don't swear by that being the only way that it works. Come on, guys.
What's like a camera you would suggest, like recommend?
What do you shoot?
Shoot.
All right, what would you want to shoot? Like, would you want to shoot photos or video or portraits or church, like videos? So there's 100 ways to answer the question. there's medium budgets, there's high budgets. All of that aside, really, right now, I've been enjoying Sony. For I hate to say anything is the right way though, because I grew up on Canon. I really like Canon, and Canon has a great video camera. Some of my friends grew up on Sony. They really like Sony. They bought Sony. Sony has great cameras. Nikon has great cameras. Blackmagic has great cameras. There's almost no like wrong way you can go. It's just kind of what fits your workflow. So I have 3 Blackmagics, and I enjoy shooting those a lot. But I hate having to like rig them out big and having them all, they're very heavy. And if I'm like, when me and Tyler came to film promos last year here, I had to pack like 2 suitcases to get all my gear for my Blackmagics. And then when I had to rig up the gimbal, it weighed like 20 pounds, and it was tough to run around. We wanted to go shoot in the city. I didn't want to carry a 20-pound camera around the city, so I brought my Canon, but then the image wasn't good enough because it was an older Canon. So it's really dependent on what you're doing. When it comes to live stream, which goes kind of to the video in the church, I push people either towards Sony right now or towards Blackmagic, and that just is primarily dependent on budget and look. Blackmagic's cheaper, but it does take a little bit more volunteer knowledge to run because it's manual focus, things like that. But I think it actually looks better, in my opinion, than Sony's. Whereas Sony's a little bit more expensive, but it has autofocus, it's lighter, things like that. So in a long answer, and kind of just because we have the time for a long answer, I really have liked Sony right now. I have the Sony a7 IV, and then I have the FX30 that are both really good cameras. They make really good middle budget cameras and low budget cameras as well. So there's very easy entry into any of them, and their lenses aren't super expensive. If you want to go a little bit bigger, you could go Blackmagic. Blackmagic is really good. It's a very good entry because it's super easy to understand. Like the menu's very easy. Sony menus drive me crazy, and I own 2 of them now, and I hate the menu system. I can't find things. It's just confusing. But I wanted something small that I didn't have to carry a whole suitcase for. So that was why I went over to Sony. Canon's new video cameras, they have really great options. They have the R50 now, which is a really good entry level. They have the R5, and the R5 and R6 are really great medium level. They have the R5C, which is a really great high level, or like they're really high level, like the C70, C80 stuff. So I would say you can't go wrong, but if you're looking for one, it just depends on your budget. And if there's any type of camera that you're familiar with, I would say stick with that. So if you have ever used a Canon and you liked it, Canon's a great option. If you have used Sony's and you kind of understand Sony's a good option. But I don't think there's any one that's like the king of cameras right now. Their technology is just so good that you can get whatever works for you. And also, I'm going to be honest, I buy a lot of my stuff off Facebook Marketplace. So part of the reason I even went Sony is because I got a good deal on one on Facebook, and I was like, sure, I'll give it a try. So I bought it. I used it for 8 or 9 months. I really liked it, so I bought another one. So it's also dependent on that. I don't fight the battle of like this camera is better than this brand or things like that, because just everything's so good at this point. For y'all who came in, we talked about video, and we didn't go too in depth, but we were talking about video in the church, things like that, what we use it for, social media, live stream. At this point, though, I kind of just open it up for any questions. So if y'all have any questions on video, this is just open questions, open dialogue, just to talk about video either in the church, for live stream, social media video, video gear. It's just completely open-ended questions, so feel free. Yes?
What lenses do you guys run at your church?
Yeah, so lenses, we have 4 cameras, well, technically 5. One's a GoPro. I try not to use it as much as possible. But for our 5 cameras, we have the GoPro, which is just sitting in the drum cage, and that's just a GoPro. Our main camera is a Sony Z280. It's a broadcast camera. That's the last one of our old system that we haven't been able to replace, just because getting a good zoom lens for a Sony camera or for a Blackmagic is a little bit more expensive. So that is just like an automatic. It has like the lens mounted that's just built in. For the 3 Blackmagics, they take Canon lenses or Canon mount lenses. So that's also another aspect. If you have Canon and you want to go to video and get Blackmagic, your lenses will transfer. It's great. So one Blackmagic on our stage left is it's running an 18-35 Sigma lens, which is really good. It's nice and wide, but it also can crop in it if needed. Then for the other stage camera, it's running a 24-70, which is Tamron. And then the crowd camera is a 70-200, just a Canon 70-200. So kind of just different depths. Ultimately, I kind of want to switch the 18-35 with the 24-70 or even a 24-105 because I find myself not having enough zoom from that camera. They kind of just, it looks cool on drums, it looks cool on keys, kind of the wider shot, but when you want to get tight, you can't. So I might switch that out with a 24-70 or a 24-105 at some point. But that's the current setup we have. Another cheat, if you're using Blackmagic for broadcast and not worried about recording, if you go from Ultra HD to HD, it will actually crop your sensor. So I use that and I teach my camera operators that if they need to get a little bit more in and they don't have a lens that gets in. So they just crop the sensor in, jumps in, they get the shot, and then they go back. Any other questions? Anything that y'all want to know that I might have covered? Nothing? I got 18 minutes.
You have running cameras for your service?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have 2 roamers and then 2 tripods right now. Tripod 1 is the camera 1. That's the A camera that just follows soloist or follows the preacher. And then what I like to do with my camera 1, since I have a 1 and a 4, which is the 4 is what's called a slash camera, which is on the right side of the room and it's like a 45-degree angle to the stage. And what we use for that is that actually stays on the soloist because it's just a better option for being a solo cam. And then camera 1 will pan just back and forth because it's on a nice tripod, things like that. It's just a little easier. Whereas camera 4 is a manual focus, so it's not easy to do follows with it. So we'll let 1 do the pans and 4 will just stay on the soloist. And then the roamers are both on stage typically. And dependent on need, we'll send 1 down into the crowd to shoot stage if needed. But we have the 2 roamers on stage. That's where they start at least typically.
What wireless do you use?
So,
transmitter?
yeah, we use the Teradek 750 bolts.
Okay.
They have worked really well. In the last year, though, they've introduced year or two, Teradek came out with the 756s, which are, in my opinion, a lot better because they utilize the 6 gigahertz band, and that has led to us having a lot less interference when I travel and use those ones, whereas the other ones use the 5 band, and I've run into interference with those ones, especially now that phones are running 5G primarily.
Yeah. Do you run into LUTs in all your cameras, or do you just white balance them and then you?
I white balance and then I white balance to eye.
Yeah.
I've used gray cards and white cards to white balance, and it never gives me what I really want. So I just kind of white balance with what I feel looks good. And then I designed a LUT, but I did that in DaVinci. So I turned our lights on in the sanctuary and I recorded a short video, brought it and edited it to what I wanted it to look like, and then exported that as a LUT. So on the Blackmagics, those all have a LUT applied. On the one Sony, I just kind of tweaked the settings to match as close as I could. So if you watch our stream, that camera 1 doesn't match like the other 3 do, but it's as close as I could get it.
You run it for your services every Sunday, or the LUTs?
Yeah, they're in the camera and they're saved into the preset. So when they turn on the camera and load our preset, it's there. They see it as well, since Blackmagic allows you to load it in the camera so they can see what their image looks after the LUT. And then also, if you record, you still record log footage, so you're not recording the LUT. So that's really nice too.
Yeah, that's a nice feature. Yeah. So I want to assume that your lighting conditions don't change a lot during service during worship at all, or between worship and preaching. So the lighting conditions always the same, or
Alright.
do you change it much at all?
Preaching, the only thing we change is our band, we have a drum cage, so we have lights in there that go down, and some of the backlights that light up our band go down. Stage stays the same, the house comes up a little bit. And that only helps us because when he comes down and preaches, we can it gives us a little bit more brightness. Our house lights are very orange compared to our stage lights. And that's something that if you watch our stream, I'm not proud of that. When he goes down, it's very orange. And to the point of really the only way to combat that would be to have a separate preset that changes white balance. And that's kind of a little too much to put on our operator, so I kind of just live with the warm. But yeah, so our lighting does come up a little bit brighter for preaching, but it's a little dimmer for worship. That's really the main change.
Yeah. Do your camera operators have to change the RS too much, how much light's coming in?
Yeah, they.
You have to do that?
That's the main thing I teach them when it comes to brightness is just adjust the iris. With the Blackmagics, it's kind of right on your finger, so it's easy for them. And our lighting is not super consistent. That's something I haven't dove into yet. The previous director who did a lot of that, he's still there, but he's not hired on at the church. He's a volunteer, so it's hard to ask him to, hey, I want to go and redo all the lighting, but I also don't know how to use the console. So we haven't gone too deep into the lighting. We're just kind of adjusting accordingly. So when you go to a keyboard shot, it's a little brighter. When you go to drums, you have to brighten it up. When you go to the vocals, it's too bright. So they're just rolling the iris as they shoot.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of you got Blackmagic cameras, so your operators were trained to look out for focus always, I guess, using the focus speaking.
Yeah.
Is that how you manage that? Or?
They're all focusing manually.
Yeah.
So, and we just turned peaking on, and that's something that's the biggest struggle for our newer operators is learning to just make sure things are focused. But they typically will pick it up pretty quickly, and then once they get used to it, it's second nature.
In terms of creative switching, how do you go about switching from Sunday to Sunday, Sunday to Sunday, because each Sunday becomes repetitive in terms of the shot selections. Do you find that becomes fatiguing after a while, or
I've dealt with that a little bit, but I know some of our other operators and our other directors have dealt with that a lot, where they get really annoyed at the lack of variety in shots. I think there's a couple ways to look at it, and I'll speak to this for video as a whole, because we all serve at churches, right? All right, so video as a whole, you can shoot at a church, and when you shoot weekly, things get super boring at times, where it's how in the world do I make this look different? At the same time, though, I think there's a strength in being consistent too. So I think if we try to be too different every week, we lose the value of our church being a consistent look and a consistent brand, because we talked about yesterday in one of our sessions how we want to be authentic to who we are. We don't change it. Our services are pretty similar each week. The message changes and we want to follow that. The music does change, we want to follow that. But our church it's an organization, and you don't see organizations changing how they do things on a week-to-week basis. So if you, one of our creative directors mentions it this way, if you watch a football game or any type of sports game, the broadcast looks the exact same whether you're watching week 1, week 2, week 3, whether they're playing at this field, wherever they're playing, the broadcast feels like you're watching the same thing. And that's because the consistency of the brand is its reliability as a part of it. So I do try to be creative, and especially with social media, I'll try to be more creative in the sense. But when it comes to our church broadcast, I would rather be more consistent in our broadcast than always creative in the broadcast. So some of the shots do feel consistent, and sometimes it does. But if you're really striving to really serve the music or the preaching as he's preaching, I think you'll find that it's different enough. And so my focus is to switch and I guess what I teach when it comes to music, I teach them to have the energy of the music. So if they're running a camera during a slow song, they're doing soft, slow movements, things like that. If they're running camera during a fast song, like I give them the freedom of like, I want swoops, like larger movements, because I want a viewer to feel the energy of the song. And you're trying to match the energy that they're providing. So the people on stage, you're trying to match that. You can do that with social a lot too, and that's a really cool way to make it energetic on social, is to match the energy with the camera of what that person's doing, with the rhythm, things like that. And then with broadcast, I'm matching that same energy and speed with cuts. Or another thing you can do that helps your team feel a little bit more creative and stuff, rather than cutting on every downbeat, have your cameras move to a new instrument on a downbeat and use that as a cut. So they're on drums, and then the chorus is going into the bridge, they swing over to keys for that next shot. That's a cut in itself, rather than you having to constantly clip cameras. So teaching your team to be creative in that aspect of really getting involved with the music will lead to your shots looking new and different each time. I think we get bored when it's like we have 4 tripods that are the same 4 shots, or we have the PTZs that are like the operator does the one pull out and then we take the shot, and then they zoom back in and they do the one pull out and we take. So it's like just trying to be creative in different things we do there. I agree. But I think a big valuable aspect is the consistency by which we do it too, so that it doesn't feel like a new church every week because we're trying something new every time. There is a beauty, especially with live stream, of being consistent for our viewers too. And I think that's a nice way for our viewers. Yes, they'll feel like they're a part of church, but they're also going to feel like they know it. They know this church. They're familiar with this because it's consistent. Any other questions? We got a couple minutes before. I think we have morning tea and then the second session. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got about 8 minutes until that. Any other questions? Anything video related, Benji?
What are your thoughts on like cables and videos for the live stream?
Easy rigs, I would say if you're using a heavy camera like a Blackmagic, I love them. We have one, and again, right now the church is kind of using a lot of my gear, so my Easy Rig is just at the church. It lives there basically. When I travel, I'll take the gear I need, but right now, one camera has it. Camera 3, the other Blackmagic does not have it, and like there's a noticeable difference of like the one who has it both for his skill and his movement, but also for the fact of it's not as tiring. So I recommend them. I think we get people are like, oh, you look like an alien or things like that because you have the Easy Rig. After 2 weeks, no one pays attention. You've probably learned this with roaming, but once you do it for a couple weeks at your church, people don't. It's just natural at a certain point. And so it's just, we have an Easy Rig on stage. No one cares. We've done it for a couple months. People don't notice. I think they're great for what they are. If you're going up and filming a song or 2 songs, I would say you don't have to do the Easy Rig. But like last Sunday, I had an operator that was serving during 9 and an 11. So I was like, hey, since you're doing both, you get the Easy Rig both services because the other guys are doing one service. So just being aware of that. But when it comes to the weight of the camera, it's very valuable to have. Gimbals are great too. They're very unique shots. It's something you can't get a lot. Anytime I do a project, like a larger project, I always utilize one in our stream. At our church, I don't, just because one, we don't have an extra spot for it in the system. But for any special event, I utilize one. We used one on Easter last year, and I was cutting like super quick, kind of more like concert focused feel of my directing. And I remember Pastor being like, it was almost like, because we had just incorporated the vertical walls, and he's like, it was almost too engaging. He's like, I stopped paying attention because I was just watching the screen. And I was like, that's great, because that's what I want, is I want people to be like sucked in. But I also realized that for church, if everyone's distracted by that, that's not serving the message anymore. So we had to kind of drop back, and I think that gimbal was one of the things that was really causing that, because it was just a lot of motion. And again, it was the way we utilized it for that service. There was a lot of movement. So we pulled back. I switched less. I kind of dropped back on my event. I went less into the event mode and more into church mode. And the next week he's like, oh, that was great. And so the gimbal is really good. I would, if I could use it every Sunday, I would. It's not a possibility at our church right now. Anything else? A couple more minutes. What's up?
How much does your Easy Rig cost?
So I got a really good deal on mine. I rented them from a company called Lens Rentals a lot. And I typically was renting it like 3 or 4 times a year. And then I rented it one time and they offered for me to buy that one for, so it was, I think it was like $800 or something US dollars. They were like, hey, you can buy it. We'll take the price you already paid on the rental for this event. We'll take that off. So it was going to be like $780. And then I also had a 15% coupon for that company. So I got it for like $700. Easy Rigs, the one I have, it typically sells for 11 or 12 new. But since mine was a rental, it was pretty worn. Because the only reason they were selling it that cheap is because they had gotten their money's worth out of it, which means it had been used a lot. There's a company though called Ready Rig, I believe. I'd have to verify and I can try to, let me see if I can pull that up. There's another company that has like an alternative to Easy Rig that my buddy has and says it works just fine. And they're only like $400. Flycam is what it is. Yeah, so Flycam, it's the Flowline starter. It's $400, which that is US, but compared to Easy Rig, it's almost the exact same thing. It's just a little bit like cheaper quality. But when you're saving $800, it's really hard to complain. Any other questions?
One more.
Yeah? Finish.
What's your thoughts or around having a camera-man operator, operating camera versus a PTZ?
So, again, I think that goes back to kind of finding the vision of the church. And my big thing with PTZs is the look gives me more of the broadcast look rather than the cinema look. So with our church, that doesn't fit in the look that we want. But there's also like, depending on money, there's like the Sony ones that are actually a mirrorless body on a PTZ motor. Those look cool, but I just find I have a lot more control with an operator because you have freedom to go like do whatever you want. And now, especially when you make that operator roaming, that's even more. But even with the tripod, you just can get more natural movement that you wouldn't get out of a PTZ. But PTZs are really good when you're working with less volunteers because you can operate multiple at once and you can program things, which I will say that's one thing I wish I could incorporate into my streams a little bit more is a couple like PTZs that matched my cameras for like those big push outs or push ins, just because I don't have that aspect. So I think they're valuable in their use cases, but it ultimately just determines on what your needs are and where the value is for you. If it's valuable because of an operator standpoint or a price standpoint, I think it's valuable in that aspect. When it comes to if you're going for a cinema look, I don't think they're a valuable alternative because they just don't have that sensor size. Anything else? If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up this one. And then after the morning tea, we'll be doing photo in the church. And what I plan on doing with that is I'll kind of go through our photographer's handbook that I have for my church, and we can actually look through that as if I was training a photographer at my church. And then we'll do more questions. So if any of you guys have questions on photo, we can answer those. But awesome, guys. Thank y'all so much. If y'all guys have any questions or want to ask me a question just separately, feel free to come talk to me. Or if you want to reach out to me on social, I'm always willing to try to help out as much as I can. Thank you, guys.